Welcome to the Link to Change podcast. I'm Hayley Brown. I am the Chief Executive at Link to Change. And over the next few weeks, we will be looking and discussing key areas in regards to exploitation and hopefully answering a few questions that you as a community have posed to us. I would like to introduce you to my special guest, Dr. Audrey Tang, who is a chartered psychologist and the host of Mental Health Matters in California's E360 TV. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Hayley.
Lovely to have you again.
It's always a pleasure to chat with you. I learn so much from you. I get more and more scared, though, every time you tell me more. And clearly you're having that impact on our viewers since you appeared on Mental Health Matters, because they've been sending in questions as well and asking for even more information on these topics. And today's one is focusing on healthy relationships, exploitation and codependency. And this one, I don't think it's just about young people actually, but how do we help young people, or indeed anyone, distinguish between a healthy relationship and an exploitative one? Because grooming creates that false sense of love and security, and abuse does exactly the same thing.
Well, it's a minefield. We could probably do a year's worth of series on this,
gosh.
But a healthy relationship is, I believe, is something that is built on trust. It's built on respect, open and honest conversation. And for, as you say, anyone to be able to understand that, it's so difficult. Every person has a different perception of what healthy relationships are. When we're working with young people, I believe that nowadays it's even more difficult for them to distinguish healthy relationships because we've got influences of social media, We've got influences in media, we've got influences in film and television. And I think we only have to look nowadays in film and television how relationships are portrayed.
Yes.
And some films that are targeted for young people in particular are portraying really unhealthy relationships. There is the aspect of having your phone. Oh my goodness. Again, as a parent, trying to explain to your child why your friend hasn't replied back because they have an automatic response. Even mine, my daughter does it. Mum. Not mum might be busy, so she hasn't answered the phone right now. And so I think people's expectations of someone being around and being available is so different to how, if I go back to my grandparents and society. We only have to look at rates of divorce nowadays and how relationships are portrayed. For us, it's about trying to teach young people what is healthy, what is unhealthy, what is control, what is independence, what is appropriate language, what is unacceptable behaviour, and where that line is. When someone is groomed, it then makes it even more difficult because the grooming process is about building trust in that young person in that first place, becoming that person that young person is reliant on. So they've been in a period of, let's use the classic boyfriend model of exploitation. A person has been in a relationship where the trust, the respect, all of those things have been gained. And then that person changes. But then there's aspects of things like love bombing.
Yes.
So, there's been the trust, we're then in this situation where maybe that young person has then been exploited, or there has been violence, or they've been asked to do something. They've been asked to run drugs, whatever it might be. That young person then sort of like, I'm not sure, I don't know, sometimes might have that doubt. And then all the trust, all the build, all of those things are then reinforced. I love you, all of those things, everything's going to be wonderful, everything's going to be different. And it goes back into that cycle.
And I mean, this next question, it relates to your point very much about how grooming kind of changes your mindset. We had a viewer, and this is a woman who was in an abusive relationship, so we're not talking a child here, but she said the first thing that made her realize she was in an abusive relationship was not the red flags or any of those things, because she'd ignored them. It was when she was at work in the toilet and she'd seen on the toilet door, this is what a healthy relationship looks like, this is what an unhealthy relationship looks like. And then she suddenly thought, oh my goodness, none of those green flags are actually what's happening to me. And so what role does that emotional dependency play on keeping that victim trapped?
Well, grooming fosters emotional dependency.
Yes.
And, it normalizes all those behaviors. It normalizes those imbalances. And for an adult to be able to understand, sometimes it takes for you to be able to remove yourself from a situation, to look at it from a viewpoint, because, even as an adult, using the example of someone who believes that their relationship is healthy, believes that they're in a good place, they then talk to a friend, oh no, you wouldn't accept that, oh no, you wouldn't do that. And then you think, well, is that just them? Is that just me? What's normal? What's not normal? There may be red flags, but there may be other elements of this, things that are healthy as well. And so those lines get so blurred. And that emotional dependency is key, especially when we start thinking about codependency.
Yes.
And how that develops and how that relates. So because that person then becomes reliant on another person for their own emotional validation and gratification. And so whether or not it's fear of the unknown, so you could be in a relationship and you could think, oh, I don't quite like that, or I don't quite like that. But it's all right, because they're only like that once a fortnight.
Yes.
It's all but, and I've heard the saying time and time again, but do the good times outweigh the bad? Well, as to what degree is the bad? What degree is the good? And so people tend to then cling on to those good times, because when it's good, it's brilliant.
Yes.
But also it's the fear of unknown. If that emotional dependency is there on a person, what's life like without that person?
Yes.
I'm not happy, but
would I be even
more unhappy if I wasn't with them, because I've grown to love this person, I've grown to be with this person, this is the person I want to spend the rest of my life with.
Yes.
How is life going to be without them? And that I think sometimes is one of the real scary parts of that fear of the unknown, and that fear of nobody likes a breakup. No one likes when a relationship ends, and there's different degrees of that. There is a amicable, this isn't working, end of relationship. There is kitchen floor crying, reset, end of the world relationship, and you don't know where that it sits on that spectrum.
That's really sad in so many ways as well, because that keeps people so trapped in that. It's the fear of it has to get worse before it gets better. And relating to that, I think happily now, a lot of fairy tales and Disney and things like that, they're beginning to get a little bit more self-aware.
Yeah.
But there have been some real problematic societal narratives around what love is, what loyalty is, and how do they contribute to normalizing codependency and normalizing manipulation and exploitation?
It's so difficult, because in my head, I think sometimes people are in a relationship and sometimes people give up too easily, you know.
Yes.
Going back to Grandparents' Day again, where you talk through it, you work through it, rather than just kind of pack your bags and leave. But then everyone is different, so don't stay in a relationship if you're unhappy, if it's not healthy, if it's not for you. So there's, again, it's a spectrum. I think that the movies, the media, it's all about who's with who, what's what. There's big debates over a lot of films at the moment, that whether it's a positive portrayal of domestic abuse, whether it's a negative portrayal of domestic abuse, the way that things are seen and perceived, there is so much violence.
Yes, which desensitizes us.
In films. So there is a level of desensitization. I realise that, I acknowledge that within myself, having worked in this field for over 20 years, and you know, that's something I recognise. But we go on to streaming platforms, and there is true crime, there is documentaries on serial killers, there is you know, documentaries on real life dating shows. There is in movies, it's very rare now that you will watch a movie where there's not been some sort of really aggressive sexual scenes. We know that young people have the statistic is that it can take a young person to find hardcore pornography on the internet within 30 seconds, but it could take up to 5 minutes to find some form of soft pornography, however you distinguish the difference. Access to all of those things, the increase in violence, all places an impact on relationships and how things are perceived and what is now been normalised.
Yes, it's horrific. It's absolutely horrific. And the worst thing is, it's with all the algorithms of social media and things like that. You may not even be looking, and yet it turns up.
Yes, yeah. You know, think how many young people are on certain platforms. Scroll. What's in front of them. I think, what is it, you're only 3 clicks away or something like that. And I do think that has a lot to do with how people perceive healthy relationships, and then that link to codependency. Again, those key relationships in films, and you can sit and you can be really engrossed, and then for me sometimes I'll go, well, that's codependency, well, that's this, well, that's that. But if you don't know, you just see it as this epic love story.
Yes, which is dramatic and exciting.
My all-time favourite book is Wuthering Heights. Right?
Oh, gosh.
Been my favourite since probably, I think the first time I read it was the age of 8. That's an incredibly unhealthy relationship. Incredible codependency. Yes. You know, an amazing book, but different people will have different perceptions, you know, and see the epic love story. That's what you see. That's what you see in the media, this epic love story. Actually, no, it's really quite horrific.
Yes, and when the media's called it epic,
yes,
and a love story, you begin to go, oh, well, that's what it must be like. And if mine isn't like that, then it must be boring. And then
love has to be hard. Love has to be aggressive. Love has to, you know, there has to be pain, tears, all of those different types of things. oh, so, I'm just in this nice normal relationship. That must mean that we're really boring because we cook dinner, we watch TV, we go to bed.
and yet that is one of the most healthy. Oh my goodness. So what can professionals, families and communities do to educate young people about not just the red flags, but the green flags of what makes something healthy, but also perhaps provide that early intervention before exploitation occurs?
I think for me, one of those key aspects, again, is understanding codependency, because codependency is a massive, massive factor when it comes to exploitation and grooming. And again, a really massive field. So, where the lines have got so blurred, where there is a lack of boundaries, there is emotional dependency upon each other, there is control, there is manipulation, there is that feeling that you can't survive without that other person. And just thinking, an example, a young person that has been horrifically exploited, the perpetrator, by the time they've got to court, the perpetrator is being prosecuted, that young person still feels emotionally attached and is crying because they don't want that person to be prosecuted. They don't want them to be punished because they don't have that understanding, and that is codependency. And professionals, parents, I believe, codependency has been around for very, very many years, but I don't feel there's as much education on codependency and what it is. It's termed as a word, but actually the way that trauma bonds are formed and created, and I think it's about understanding what that codependency is, that emotional understanding, that link, that trauma, all of those different types of things, and how that young person has ended up in this situation and circumstances, and understand that that young person is dependent.
I think that probably brings me to sort of our action point for today. What one thing can maybe we do to reflect on perhaps our own relationships? Because I know from what I sometimes see is we talk about codependency, but that young person's been in a codependent relationship with their own family.
Yes.
And it's normal.
Yes.
And therefore, the relationship that they're now in, whether it's the workplace or a intimate relationship, it's normal, even though I'm sitting there thinking, it's really not normal. So what can we do ourselves to really kind of, I don't know, support that person, or even reflect and make sure that we're not putting...
It's so difficult because, again, as a parent, I've got dependents. My eldest has just turned 18, and I'm at that point where she's going to be going to university. I've got to let her go. So where is that line in me going, okay, you were dependent upon me, I've now got to make you independent, and let go, and it's really confusing. And that young person's lack of understanding, because we've also got to think about how old that young person is, how we could again go on about the brain and what's there and where it's formed, and their understanding and critical thinking skills, development skills in being able to know what's what, and all of those different types of things. Understand that they're a young person.
Yes.
Understand that they don't understand.
Yes.
They don't know. And I think for us, again, it comes back to that safe space, understanding that young person is going to be so confused as to what's happening, what's going on. They don't understand that they're being exploited, that they're groomed. They don't understand the term codependency. They don't understand the difference between what my mum does for me for what my friend does for me, and where those lines are. And it's about listening and working with that young person and giving them that space, that time, that reflection, and just being there, because again, you have to build trust
Yes.
If you are a professional,
Yes.
You have to build trust with that young person. That young person has to learn to trust you when they've got this other person that they trust with everything that has suddenly gone
as well. Yeah.
Okay, and they might have their doubts, and that might be where the disclosure then comes along. But it is about just giving them that time, that space. And again, as I always say, educate yourself.
Yes, yes. Oh my goodness. Well, thank you so much, Hayley, for having me and for taking our questions.
Okay, well, it's been lovely to have you. That's all we have for today. As always, make sure that you stay safe, stay educated, and let's work towards building a healthier and better future for our children and young people.